Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome back to the Fantasy View podcast. I'm Stone Darrow, followed by my colleagues Mason Reed
What's going on, everybody?
and Paul Cotton.
Hey, how we doing, y'all?
Today we're going to be talking about the NFC North, but before I give it over to Paul, I want to talk about our social medias again. We are on Facebook at the Fantasy View. We are on Instagram, the Fantasy View, all lowercase, and Twitter, the Fantasy View. All first letters are capitalized. Paul, go ahead and take over about the NFC North for me.
Real quick, we just got our next podcast out. Go check it out today, 8/16/21. And now the time that I've been waiting for. We're going to talk about the NFC North, which consists of the basement-dwelling Staffordless Lions, unvaccinated Vikings, my rejuvenated Chicago Bears, who absolute stole Justin Fields at pick 11. You guys see his preseason debut, by the way? 14-20,
Yes.
142
Yes.
yards, one touchdown, 33 yards on the ground, and his first professional touchdown. Yeah, buddy. Yeah. And we got Aaron Rodgers and his reigning pesky Packers from up north to talk about, too. I'd take over for the recent news, Mace.
Just to build off of Justin Fields, I hope he gets to start week 1 against the Rams, and then the Rams wreck his confidence for the rest of the year. Shout out to Tyler Ledbetter. I said that on his Facebook the other day. But yeah, let's go ahead. Recent news, basically what we've been hearing all off season long. Matt Nagy's saying that Justin Fields will not be the starter. Andy Dalton will be the starter, but he's getting first team reps, basically just to throw to A-Rob, Allen Robinson. To start with player changes, we have Andy Dalton, who is now a Chicago Bear, probably the best quarterback they've had since Rex Grossman. I'm just kidding, Jay Cutler. Justin Fields, obviously, they traded away Anthony Miller. They signed free agent running back Damian Williams. That bolsters up that running back club pretty well. They've got Marquise Goodwin, and they just signed a veteran, Jason Peters. Hopefully he comes in and makes a great impact on that offensive line. Since you guys are the Bears fans, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys kick this off. How do you guys want to start it?
Well, we can just go ahead and jump straight into our busts. And, since we've been talking about Justin Fields a lot, I guess I can go ahead and talk about my bust. I'm a big Bears fan as well as Paul. I'm probably the more reasonable of the two Bears fans. And it really pains me to say this, but my bust this year in fantasy would be Justin Fields. And I'm going to kind of combo that with Andy Dalton, actually, just have both of them as busts, because it's really dependent on how either of them play. Justin Fields obviously looked incredible in his first preseason game, and I'm really excited to see what he could do for the team. But if Andy Dalton's playing really well during the season, we may never even see Justin Fields. If he's, say, 5 games in, throwing 3 touchdowns and 300 yards every game, why would you go away from Andy Dalton, But if he starts poorly performing later on in the year, maybe Justin Fields comes in. Or if Andy Dalton does bad at the beginning of the year, Justin Fields comes in week 4, week 3, around that area. But it's just a big question mark in my opinion. And, I think both of them are kind of going to be bust because Andy Dalton could lose his job at any given moment.
Building off of that, I think Andy Dalton is probably in one of the better situations of his career. He did have a chance last year in Dallas, but I don't think he was in a great situation for the way he plays. I do believe Matt Nagy is probably the best offensive mind he's ever had to work with. I'm not saying that's a lot. I don't really like Matt Nagy that much, but it's better than anybody he had on the Bengals. So honestly, Dalton could come in and just play average all year and maintain that starter position.
So just to reiterate real quick, Bill Lazor, who was with Andy Dalton in Cincinnati as his offensive coordinator, and he put up some of his best statistical seasons, is currently the offensive coordinator for the Chicago Bears and Matt Nagy. So that could play a factor in what Stone's talking about, where he plays a little bit better than people anticipate. Because I'm sure a lot of people are speculating he's going to be the 2020 version of the Dallas Cowboys Andy Dalton that we got when he got decapitated in the Washington game. Hopefully that's not the case. I mean, I'm happy either way. We'll see Justin Fields if it is the case, if he does play poorly. But at the same time, if my team's winning, can't really complain about who our starting quarterback is.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. But I mean, Justin Fields is the future right now, and Dalton's kind of the temporary fix. And I don't really care who plays well. If one of them plays well, that's who I want to play the position, right? Mason,
Exactly. He's our bridge quarterback.
yep. Mason, let's go
All
talk
right.
about your bus.
All right. I don't have many bad things to say about the Bears' offense this year. I had to scrape around to see who I think is going to be just kind of the low guy on the totem pole. He's not really on many crazy draft radars, but I'm going to have to say Jimmy Graham. Last year, he shared an even snap load with Cole Kmet, had a target rate of 13%, definitely not desirable. He finished as a tight end 11 last year, so that means he was definitely a startable tight end. He had 8 touchdowns. Uh, Basically, I can't see him replicating that 8 touchdowns again. Uh, Basically, I have really high expectations for everybody else on that offense. Allen Robinson, Darnell Mooney, David Montgomery, and Justin Fields for whenever he takes over. Um, but Paul, do you want to go ahead and give your guy since it's kind of similar?
Yeah, it's Jimmy Graham, or better yet, what I'd like to call him now, Jimmy Grandpa. He seems like he's been in the league for about 18 seasons, kind of getting up there with Tom Brady. But just see regression happening in so many ways for him. The emergence of second-year tight end Cole Kmet, and then even the chemistry that our quarterbacks are starting to pick up with newly signed free agent tight end Jesse James. He's kind of been a blessing in disguise for us coming over from Detroit. It's just going to give Jimmy Graham a lot less opportunities, and I don't think there's any chance that he catches 8 touchdowns again for us this year.
Absolutely no chance. I mean, I did not expect him at all to perform for us last year, and him doing well for us was a big old blessing in disguise because he's been a fantastic mentor to Cole Kmet, who I think after attending George Kittle and Travis Kelsey's tight end camp this summer could come out here and
But then
play a lot
you,
different, lot better. So we're gonna move on from the bust, Jimmy Graham and Justin Fields, and Justin Fields has a big old asterisk next to that because he could actually be really good. I want to talk about my guarantee, and my guarantee is David Montgomery. Uh, he has an average draft position of 3.7, which is third round, and as an RB4 last year, like he finished as the RB4. I think that's kind of criminal, especially after Matt Nagy's raved about how he wants him to get 20 carries a game this year. That's not involving the amount of pass catching he's going to be doing. That's just 20 carries a game. Uh, I see him being really good for the Bears this year. I mean, he had 10 touchdowns last year, 1,000 rushing yards, 50 catches. So there's nothing down to talk about him. I mean, he could slump a little bit compared to last year, but I just don't see it.
Absolute steal taking him in the third round. You got yourself a solid running back, probably a top 12 running back this year. I'm going to go ahead and go with my guy, Allen Robinson. Andy Dalton is probably the best quarterback he's ever played with, unfortunately. This guy commands respect, and it's an absolute steal to grab this guy in the third round. And if you're going with the trend this year, you're probably drafting running back first round, running back second round. And if that's the case, it would be very wise of you to grab a guy like Allen Robinson in the third round of this year's draft. He will post wide receiver one numbers. Um, Last year, he started and played all 16 games. He led the team with an 85% snap share and a 25% target share. Right now, he's dealing with a hamstring issue, but we don't see it as a big problem. He should be good to go. Paul?
yeah, it's kind of the same thing for me. It's Allen Robinson. The way that he's been consistent throughout his career, outside of his ACL tear injury, he's just been a monster, and it doesn't matter who's throwing him the ball. Um, with below quarterback average, or with below average quarterback play, having Nick Foles and Mitch Trubisky, who's the other backup that they had last year? Chase Daniels. Like put back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, specifically 2,397 yards, 200 catches, 13 touchdowns in 2 years. He's never finished lower than sixth in targets. It's just he's a beast. There's not much more you can say about him. He is the absolute most consistent player our offense has had since the likes of Matt Forte. And I know it's hard to compare them just because one's a running back and one's a receiver, but that's what he brings to the table every single night. Doesn't matter if he's coming off ACL tear. His first year back, he still put up 800 yards with us and like 6 touchdowns. Again, playing with Mitch Trubisky for a full season. Then just going into it, last year he put up 1,250 receiving yards, which was his most since 2015 when he had his huge 1,400-yard, 14-touchdown season. He's had some bad luck. I mean, when it comes to touchdowns, where maybe 6 a year. But I mean, 15 red zone targets with the third most in the NFL last year. That's absolutely massive, especially for a guy if Justin Fields is our starting quarterback. His percentage at Ohio State last year was magnificent in the red zone, especially throwing to receivers, not just his run game. I mean, once you start to factor those things in, like Mason's talking about, a third-round draft grade on Allen Robinson is criminal. Like, he should be looked at as one of the top-tier wide receivers, in my opinion.
He's almost a 4th-round pick. He's third-round 10th pick. Like, he's back end of the third round, too. Even at that, it's just kind of wild to me for someone who's put up the stats he has, and he has the best quarterback he's ever had in his career, sadly. But and also, I want these NFL players that made this top 100 list that came out the other day to put some respect on Allen Robinson's name, rating him as number 87. 87 is a
87?
joke. This is my Bears bias coming in a little bit, but that's a joke. Like, come on now. There's a lot of disrespect on that list. Jesse Bates at 90 is another one that I don't like, but we could go on with disrespect to some people.
We could go on with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Basically what Paul and I are trying to say, draft Allen Robinson, and if you don't, you're silly. But let's talk about another guy on this offense as a potential sleeper, Darnell Mooney.
I was just about to bring him up.
Yep.
Sorry, I stole the spotlight from you guys. He had a 73% snap share along Allen Robinson as their wide receiver 2 in the offense last year. His 61 receptions last year are tied with Tyreek Hill for 4th most all time by a rookie not drafted in the first 4 rounds. Kind of cool. He also had 660 yards and 4 touchdowns to go along with it. Not great, but with the terrible quarterback play he had last year, now bringing this consistent quarterback play that we're going to see this fantasy football year. Look for Darnell Mooney to be a sneaky draft pick.
Andy Dalton and Justin Fields can throw the deep ball, and that's something that Darnell Mooney did not have last year. If you were a Bears fan and you watched Bears games, you would see Darnell Mooney get overthrown on a streak probably at least 2 times a game. I mean,
10 yards past the secondary.
He could have easily had over 1,000 yards last year, I feel like, with some of like the plays that he got overthrown on, but I don't know.
Easily.
But I want to
talk. Just kind of adding to what Mason's talking about, him pulling him out as a sleeper. If you miss out on Allen Robinson and his consistency that he's going to bring in the 3rd round, then definitely shoot for Darnell Mooney, who's looking at a draft right around the 11th round. That, to me, for somebody who put up the promise of what he had last year, I think he's going to blow that ADP away. And only a lot of Homer fans, such as Bears fans and people who actually paid attention and liked Mooney, they're going to be the ones that are keying in on him kind of a little bit earlier than that 11th round pick, where I think. And I feel like he's one of those players that he's just going to come out and show that he needs to be respected and he needs to be one of those top guys.
And I want to talk about a different sleeper on that offense that I actually really like, and it's going to be somebody that a lot of people just aren't going to be drafting because he's going 273 in drafts right now, and his name is Damian Williams. He's going to be the 2nd-string running back in Chicago next year, and they have talked about Montgomery getting 20 carries a game, and he's going to be involved in the pass game. But in the preseason game, we saw Montgomery and Damian Williams sharing first-team reps in the first 2 drives that they did. Monty had 2 carries, as did Damian Williams. Damian Williams on one of them went up the middle. It kind of got plugged up, and he bounced out to the outside and had like a 17-yard run on a hold. So, I mean, he still has it even after opting out last year. And I mean, the last season he played for the Chiefs was not bad either. I mean, he had like 600 rushing yards that year and about 200 receiving yards, if I remember right. That might be incorrect, but I think he's just somebody that is going to be slept on. And if like it's a really late round kind of like boomer bust kind of guy, you can get solid value at the running back position from him.
I like that a lot.
Right. Paul, do you want to talk about the Bears anymore? I know this is our team, so we've touched everything.
I think we've covered most avenues with him. We talked
Other than
about
the fact that they're
emerging
going to
Cole Kmet.
lose to the Rams week 1. I'm sorry.
Okay.
They aren't, but so
we'll see come week 1.
We're gonna move on to the Green Bay Packers, Paul's favorite team in the NFL. Mason, you want to talk about some news from them?
Yeah. The big news all season long was Aaron Rodgers not wanting to come back and play, and I don't blame him. He got treated poorly. I'm gonna guess for most of his career. He didn't. He's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, talent-wise, and come to find out, they don't give him much of any say for anything. They haven't drafted him a first-round offensive weapon, and I don't know how long. They drafted Jordan Love to back him up. That was a big slap in the face. I know that pissed him off a lot.
Interject on that real quick. In storied franchises, when it comes to the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears and the rivalry that we have, I believe Andy Dalton was on our roster for all of like a week, and we gave him notice that we were trading up to take Justin Fields. Aaron Rodgers has been on the Packers for about 16 years now, and they couldn't even give him notice that they were going to trade up and take Jordan Love. So if that doesn't speak to the type of environment that he has in the front office over there, that would irk him so bad to not want to come back, I mean, I think the disrespect just kind of speaks for itself at that point.
It's pathetic. He's one of the best quarterbacks to ever play the game, without a doubt. I'm a Bears fan, and I'm saying that. I don't care. He's one of the best, obviously. I don't get how front
Respect
office
the talent.
Yeah, I don't know how front office could leave out somebody that valuable to the organization.
Completely disrespected. Look for this to be, I think they restructured his deal for this to be his last season as a Packer. Look to this to be probably the last best season the Packers ever have. I don't know. Let's go ahead and move on to our potential bust. Stone, do you want to start that off?
Yeah, so my bust is Robert Tonyan at the tight end position. So I think that he's a little overrated in drafts this year. He's not going high or anything. He's going probably about where he should, but I'm not a huge fan of him last year because, I mean, his yards were underwhelming, and he had 11 touchdowns, so, obviously that's the number that pops out, but I feel like that's going to have to decrease. He had 3 of them in one game, so, I mean, he had 8 over the rest of the season, which is still a good number, but I don't know. Maybe Randall Cobb comes in and steals some of those targets. I don't know. Probably not, but Devontae Adams still there. Aaron Jones is still there. I just think that his role will be a little diminished from last year. I think you could probably get a better tight end at a earlier round than what Robert Tonyan's going to offer you.
His ADP Stone is about 908 right now, so kind of somewhere closer to the back end of the 9th round.
I thought you 908 meant 908. I'm like, huh?
Oh, no. Nope. Sorry about that. 9th round, 8th pick.
Maybe give him a shot.
yeah. Pick 908. I'd be drafting him too.
But I'll just build off of that. Anybody potential bust on this team, anybody whose name is not Devontae Adams, Aaron Jones, Aaron Rodgers, and Randall Cobb. But basically, I'm with Stone. I think Tunyan's going to get less usage with Cobb stealing some targets. He is the number 7 overall ranked tight end this year. I think in most league formats. He averaged about 9 points a game last year. Nothing crazy. I think it was basically he had some real high games, real low games. I'd rather take my chances on a late round flyer like Blake Jarwin, whose average draft position is in the 15th round. And you'll probably see about the same production, maybe if not a little more consistent than Tunyon himself.
We've already talked
Well,
about Blake Jarwin in a past podcast to you guys. So we're pretty high on the guy. I really like him personally, and someone like Tanyan who averages 9 points a game, I just don't justify taking him as the 7th ranked tight end, especially since somebody like I think Logan Thomas is rated a little bit ahead of him, but maybe behind. Actually, I can't remember. Paul, do you want to talk about your bust?
Yeah, so mine is Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And to be honest, I think most even Packers fans could agree with me here. Um, he's shown promise in the talent, but at the same time, he's had those silly, dumb drops. Streaking down the field, Aaron Rodgers has him wide open and hits him in the hands, and he just drops it because he's not trying to catch it with his hands. He's trying to corral it and catch it with his chest. Never a good thing when it comes to receivers, and he just consistently does it. Back of the end zone, same type of situation, wide open. He beats his defender and drops a touchdown. It's one of those things, especially with the addition of Randall Cobb, him coming back. He's going to be the odd man out, in my opinion. Randall Cobb's going to be playing in the slot. He's going to have those targets. He's going to have to go up against Devontae Adams and Alan Lazard on the outside. If it hadn't been for Lazard's injury last year, that stomach condition or whatever he had going on, his abdominal, whatever, he would have shown that he could be a very solid number 2, and he would have been the number 2 for the entire season for the Packers. Now you have to couple that with bringing back a guy like Randall Cobb. That's all going to take touches away from Valdez-Scantling, and at least going to make him a 3rd or 4th option at best. Then you also have to think about the guy you just talked about, Stone, Robert Tunyon. I mean, he's still looked at as kind of one of those, wouldn't call him a top tier, but I'd say maybe a 3rd tier tight end, 2nd tier. But he's a guy that Aaron Rodgers trusts, that he's going to go to, and he's going to get him the ball. So all that coupled together, to me, like I said, it just feels like Marquez is the odd man out in that offense. I don't think he's going to have the volume it's going to warrant him being drafted. I'm not even sure if he's even drafted right now. He might be going later than like 17 rounds, which typically anything more than 16-round draft is like you don't have that many spots. So a lot of times he's not even drafted. I wouldn't take a chance on him, but again, I'm a Bears fan, and that's a similar situation with Javon Wims to me. I think he's a guy that doesn't need to be out on the field. I think he hurts you more than he helps you.
Very, very boomer bust kind of players, but the difference between him and Wims is Wims just can't catch anything. I want to talk about I want to talk about our guarantees now, and it's the man, the myth, the legend, Aaron Rodgers for my guarantee. I think it's very obvious he's got one more season with Devontae Adams. He's probably going to be in the MVP conversation again. I don't think there's any reason to steer away from him. Don't be scared of the guy. He's still Aaron Rodgers, and he's still going to do his thing.
Aaron Rodgers, yeah, he's amazing. I'm going to go with an easy pick, hard not to, Devontae Adams. Adams was the top scoring fantasy wide receiver of 2020 by 29 points. Not to mention he missed 2.5 games due to injury. He's hands down the best wide receiver in football. Fight me, I don't care. From pick 7 on in the first round, I am taking him in most draft formats. I'm not too high on any of the other running backs that are falling behind there. I know this is a very heavy running back draft type season, but I believe in Devontae Adams more than I believe in most of those running backs that are going right there. So I'm going to pick Devontae Adams anytime after pick 7 and on in the first round. Let's see here. Last year, just to build off of that, he had a 34% target share, and he averaged 21.5 points per game and finished with 18 touchdowns. The man is unstoppable. One more year with Aaron Rodgers. Let's run it back, boys.
I still think DeAndre Hopkins is better personally.
I got some love for D-Hop, but man, Devontae,
it's a tough fight. It's a tough fight, that's for sure. So I'll go into my guarantee, and that's Aaron Jones. Jamal Williams, he left in free agency. That's one less guy he has to contend with. They still have second-year running back A.J. Dillon, and he's going to replace most of the touches that Jamal Williams seen. But even with that, even with splitting carries, Jones still produced 1,450 all-purpose yards with 11 touchdowns last year. I think that's just going to get better. He has that ability to have 5, 6, 7 catches out of the backfield. We've seen those screen plays that he gets, and he can take it to the house 50 yards. Now, whether you're going to get the consistent catchability out of the backfield from him, those dump downs, it's kind of to be determined, but he has that potential. I think he's one of the safest picks outside of what these two already said, Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers. You talk about a stacked core in fantasy. Stack of these three would be absolutely incredible just because the amount of points that offense will score and that they score every single year. Wouldn't suggest stacking all three, maybe one or two, maybe getting a Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Jones or a Devontae Adams, Aaron Rodgers stack in fantasy, but I mean, you're not going to go wrong. And that's coming from a Bears fan. I will give respect and credit where it is due, and these three definitely have my respect.
I have a question. Who do you think the better trio is? Rodgers, Jones, and Adams, or Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown in their prime?
Ooh,
Oh man,
Steelers. I have to go with the Steelers.
I think in their prime, yeah, but Rodgers is better than
In their
Roethlisberger in my opinion. But Le'Veon Bell,
Yes.
back with the Steelers, was just unstoppable.
yeah,
Antonio Brown.
yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
it's the same way that Mason's just talking about. Devontae Adams, he's
Mhm.
unstoppable. He's to me better than what AB was then. He's obviously a bigger receiver than AB, but AB was incredible. I mean, that man was doing things that hadn't been done since the likes of Jerry Rice and Randy Moss. Like he was out there putting up huge seasons back to back to back to back, and I mean, I don't know. That's a great question. That's something
That's a
that
good
I
one.
feel like is a debate
that was
for
a-
another day. But at the moment, I'd probably stick with the Packers on this one.
I gotta go soon.
I don't know who I'd pick. I think I would go with the Packers as well, and I think it just comes down to me. Jones versus Bell. I think I'm picking Bell in his prime, and then Brown versus
Taking
Adams.
Le'Veon.
I'm taking Adams, and then Rodgers
Yeah.
versus Roethlisberger. I think it's just easy. I think you have to take Rodgers.
I think
100%.
overall the Steelers trio was more dominant.
Killer bees.
It was a great. That's just a great question to argue about. I do have a question for you guys. AJ Dillon is average 9-10 this year, round 9, pick 10. Would you guys pick him any earlier, or would you not go after him at all, or pick him later if he falls to 10 or 11?
If he's going in the 9th round, I'm just not gonna pick him. That's just me personally.
Aaron Jones has only played all 16 games once in 4 seasons. Now that's not crazy, being that the NFL people get banged up. But Aaron Jones had a pretty good season.
How many
last
has he
year.
missed though? Is it like
I
he's
don't
missing 6 games, 4 games, or is it just like 1 or 2?
I don't know
mean-
if Aaron Jones gets hurt, or if AJ Dillon is a TD vulture this year. I don't know. Does that? Bring
It's
down
very
Jones'
possible,
value?
but I mean,
I don't see
you
it.
know, like I spoke to that point already with Jamal Williams leaving. He was kind of the one that took those touches, anyways. I think
they're
AJ
different
Dillon
running backs.
is solid. They're 100% different running backs, and I think AJ Dillon is solid. Would I take a chance on him in the 9th round? Possibly. Would I rather hope he falls to the 11th or something like that to take him as a backup? Probably. And it also depends on if I have Aaron Jones to begin with, if I want to handcuff him. If I want to handcuff because of the fear of Aaron Jones potentially missing games, and to me, that definitely increases his ADP, and I'm probably going to take him around that 9-round mark. Otherwise, if I don't have Jones and I'm just taking him as like some type of flex depth, bench depth, then I would hope that he probably would still be there at 11, and I would
I
feel
just want
comfortable
to
taking
say
him.
that AJ Dillon is built different. I think that dude runs harder and maybe even a little better than Aaron Jones. I'm interested to see how they treat him coming in. But let's go ahead and move on to the Vikings.
So yeah, the Vikings. Mason, if you want to just get right into the news with the Vikings that we have.
Yeah. Yeah, I think as of August 3rd, the Vikings had the lowest vaccination rate in the NFL. Um, and one of the biggest news coming out of camp from offense, second year wide receiver Justin Jefferson is dealing with an AC joint sprain. I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into everything. But I will mention some coaching changes as it could pertain to how the offense goes this year. Clint Kubiak moved to offensive coordinator. He wants to evolve to the current standard of the NFL air raid offense. But with Zimmer there, I don't really see them changing away from their like old school run the ball down your throat mentality. Um, but it could be interesting because Kirk Cousins, he's kind of slept on as the quarterback. I believe he has ability to kind of air that ball out. And then one other thing that's kind of cool, Keenan McCardell was hired as a wide receiver coach. And I think that's just to kind of help the development of the superstar receiver, Justin Jefferson.
Justin Jefferson, you say? Well, might I be crazy enough to say that he'd be my bust this year? Yeah, it does sound pretty crazy, right? I actually love the guy. I'm a Bears fan. He's in my division. I still love him. He's a fantastic player. But my argument has been he performed so well last year that, like, how can he repeat what he did? He had 1,400 yards on 125 targets. Like, that's just insane. He's going in the second round right now. I'm not too sure about that. And like Mason said, with the AC joint sprain, there's a little bit of question marks going up. Potential sophomore year slump out of the guy. Actually, most probable sophomore year slump. If he goes better than 1,400 yards in his sophomore year, then yeah, I'll just pick him in the first round for the rest of my life. But I just think it's really hard to increase what he was able to do last year.
Agreed. And that's why he's going to be my bust with asterisks by that because he is a good wide receiver. With an average draft position of round 3, pick 3, wide receiver number 6 off the board, Justin Jefferson suffered that AC joint injury early in camp. It was a grade 1 or 2 sprain. No, it was a grade 1, which is the best news for them because he is already, as of now, August 16th, he's already day-to-day. He's about ready to come back, start practicing. But this type of injury is concerning to me as a fantasy manager, as it could linger for early parts of the season. This directly affects his ability to reach overhead and catch the ball, as it would for any wide receiver. Like Stone said, I believe there's going to be regression. I don't think he's going to be able to manage that 1,400 yards on 125 targets. Just basically the way their offense has normally ran in the past. But with this injury, I do think it's going to kind of slow the beginning of his fantasy production this year. Odds are, if you're drafting him as your wide receiver number 1, it could lead to headaches. He might not. You're going to have to start him if he's playing, if he's on the field, and he might not produce the greatest numbers. That's all I have on Justin Jefferson.
Well, I know Paul has a receiver that he was also calling a bust, but I don't know if I'd label him really as a bust.
Oh, I mean, D.D. Westbrook coming in as a free agent. I can't really call him a guarantee. I can't call him anything solid. I don't know what else to call him besides a bust at this point. Obviously, we haven't seen him do anything in a Vikings uniform as he just came over from Jacksonville. But coming off a torn ACL, that isn't promising. Even when he played back-to-back healthy seasons, he only managed 122 catches on 200 targets for 1,300 yards and 8 touchdowns. And obviously, split that in half. It's 60 catches out of 100 for 700 yards and 4 touchdowns. That is average at best. But again, now you're talking about somebody who is considered their number 1 overall in Jacksonville. He was ahead of DJ Chark, and even a rookie such as DJ Chark came in and was pushing D.D. Westbrook for that number 1 spot because of how well he wasn't producing. I feel like it's just kind of followed him throughout his career so far. He's been inconsistent. I don't think he's huge fantasy value. Now, whether he's being drafted or not, I have no idea. I don't know if he's even worthy of a pick. I just would stay away from him entirely.
His
We
position
already
rank
talked about.
his position rank on ESPN right now is 1055. So unless you're picking in round 120, I'd say probably don't draft the guy.
Yeah. To me, it's not even worth it. There's so many other choices there that I think can give you value instead of him. Somebody as simply as Adam Thielen. Yeah, he seems like an aging receiver, but at the same time, I mean, he's still out there producing. He's out there taking double teams away for Justin Jefferson. Obviously, Justin Jefferson's probably going to get those double teams this year, and Thielen might be the guy. I'll hand it over to Mason, though.
All right. Yeah, kind of building off what Paul said. Adam Thielen is aging, but Kirk Cousins, like I said, is that underrated QB with few weapons. Just like I just mentioned, Justin Jefferson has got that AC joint sprain, so his production right out the gate could be super high. Right now, his ADP average draft position is the 5th round. I'm big on opportunity. Last year, he had a 92% snap share and paired that with 14 points a game. He posted 74 catches, 925 receiving yards, and 14 touchdowns. His 20 end zone targets were 3 more than any other player. Thielen disappeared at times with, I think, 6 single digit fantasy point games. Nobody likes to see that. But he delivered a high ceiling with 6 top 10 fantasy weeks, tied for third most in 15 games. He has now finished 3 of the past 4 seasons as a top 10 fantasy wide receiver. I think it is silly to draft him in the 5th round or later. I would draft him sooner, but if I can get him in the 5th round, I'm going to take him all day. He's going to be one of my starting wide receivers probably all year long. That's all I have to say on Adam Thielen.
Thielen's also my guarantee as well, and it's pretty much for every single reason that Mason stated as well. He kind of regressed in the yardage last year with 925 yards, and then, not counting the season where he got hurt and missed half the season. The 2 years before that, he had 1,200 yards and 1,300 yards respectively. So I expect his yardage to go up this year. Like I said, I expect Justin Jefferson's to kind of decrease a little bit. But also, I don't see Adam Thielen's touchdowns maintaining at 14. If he can maintain that and then go above 1,000 yards, he's obviously going to be a top 10 receiver option once more.
Yes.
And it's definitely within the realm of possibility. I think Adam Thielen's been a fantastic receiver his entire career, and I don't see why it would change now.
If they implement that air raid offense like they want to, then the sky is the limit for Thielen and Justin Jefferson.
And D.D. Westbrook.
Oh, don't make me laugh right now. I gotta pee. All right, Paul, you go.
I'll transition into my guarantee, and that's Dalvin Cook. I know I've already kind of preferenced it before in one of our first podcast episodes. I'm a guy that likes to take a chance on rookies or first or second year players, and they typically don't produce until about a year later. And that's the way I was with Dalvin Cook. I was super high on him coming out of Florida State as a rookie. Me and Mason ended up drafting him in a shared league that we had, and I want to say the 3rd round. Our first 2 picks had been Mike Evans at the 2nd overall pick.
Oh, no.
Crazy pick. And then we came back and got Todd Gurley the year that he absolutely went mad. And our 3rd pick was Dalvin Cook. Fortunately, tore his ACL and he's been injured. He was the 2nd leading rusher behind the Yeti Derrick Henry last year with 1,557 yards and 16 touchdowns. He adds check down and receptions out of the backfield. His receiving yards and his screenplay ability is some of the best in the NFL when it comes to dual threat running backs where you have to stack the box to watch them come through the tackles, or they're actually being thrown out into the flats and they catch screens. And he's been a producing player. Granted, there is a couple times where he might miss 1 to 2 games throughout the year with injury or just wear and tear on his body. But he's always been that consistent guy. He's been the top 3, top 4 for fantasy running backs the past 2 years. And like Mason already preference with Mike Zimmer and his antiquated run the ball, run the ball, run the ball down your throat type of offense, Alvin Cook's just going to get touches. He's going to get the opportunity to do exactly what he did last year. And there's a reason why he's considered probably looking at the number 1 pick by some people. I would still give it to Christian McCaffrey at the moment. But I mean, he's a safe top 3 pick, no matter what running back you go with.
It's like Mason said, Mike Zimmer, old-headed coach right there, likes to run the ball. I don't see why he'd go away with it with Dalvin Cook being on your team. Let's move on to the basement dwellers now of the division and the NFL for that matter. The Detroit Lions. Mason, you want to talk about some news there?
Oh, not much to talk about. They've now got. Well, let's just talk about some player changes. They brought in Jared Goff as their quarterback. I have more on that later. They lost Matt Stafford to the Rams. Let's go, baby. Lost Kenny Galladay, but they gained Tyrell Williams. I don't think that adds much. They drafted Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I think they added Darren Fells to the tight end position. But yeah, let's just get right into sleepers on these guys. I mean, bust. Sorry, bust.
Well, my bust is TJ Hawkinson, and I know that's going to sound kind of absurd with everyone saying that he's the only option on the offense. Yeah, I'm aware of that. But also at the same time, that's not completely true because they actually have a decent amount of weapons on that offense that people are sleeping on. They got 2 solid running backs. They have Hawkinson, obviously, and they got a couple receivers there that are pretty solid. Not great receivers or anything, but they'll have fantasy numbers this year. Personally, I think Jared Goff arriving is going to hurt his value. Last year with Matthew Stafford at the helm, he had 101 targets, which is good, but he only tallied up 723 yards and 6 touchdowns, which really isn't anything special. I mean, he did have 67 catches to pair along with it, so PPR, that's really valuable. He probably scored you like 12, 13 points a game. But I think with Jared Goff, his production is only going to fall a little bit. I just can't really justify him being the bona fide tight end 4 right now.
I don't mean to interject with that, Stone, and I completely agree, but it's one of those things you have to think about their offensive line as well. It's relatively solid, but Matt Stafford has had issues his entire career with that offensive line and being hurt. And Jared Goff, we've seen it. If he doesn't have a good line to protect him, he's kind of one of those guys that becomes a deer in the headlights. And he gets looks lost at times. He throws bad interceptions. And I think that's speaking to everything you're talking about, where trying to get to TJ Hawkinson, trying to find his check down, like it's just he's going to have so many issues. And I don't like Jared Goff like all that much at all. And I feel like that's kind of a perfect segue right into Mason's pick.
Yeah, so my bust is Jared Goff. He was a bust of a draft pick when the Rams grabbed him. I'm still salty. But anyways, I watched him ruin the Rams' chances of being a consistent contender for 5 years. I have zero to little faith in the guy. I was blessed to watch his inability to read a defense and his awesome trick of staring down the wide receivers that he's throwing to. He's not a hot draft item this year, but I just wanted to throw shade at this guy. His starting wide receivers this year are Tyrell Williams and Rashad Perriman. Major downgrades from what he's had before. I do like the rookie Amon-Ra St. Brown. I hope I said that right. But I don't think with rookie track records, he doesn't have much of a chance to do anything great for the team.
I want to add, when I said solid receivers, I was kind of hinting at Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he could kind of be the guy who breaks out for Detroit this year. It's not going to be anything crazy. It's going to be just solid rookie numbers, and I think people are going to be able to nab him late in the drafts, and people are going to get steals out of him, personally. But
Very nice.
I want to talk about my guaranteed. It's DeAndre Swift. Last year he had pretty solid numbers as a rookie. He averaged 4.6 yards per carry and had 10 touchdowns. A lot of people like to talk about Jamal Williams coming into town and how he's going to take some targets and runs, and he is. He's a good player, but I think you can't argue the fact that DeAndre Swift only had 100 carries last year and ended up with 500 rushing yards, and he had 46 catches along with it for another 350 yards, and then just the 10 total touchdowns. I think as a rookie, those numbers are, I'm not going to say incredible, but they are very respectable, very good numbers, and I think he can build off of that this year. Mason.
Very nice.
So, I mean, but sorry, go ahead, Mason.
All right. Sorry, I'm going to go into my guarantee, opposite of Stone. I am going with the average draft position of 5.09, the tight end for TJ Hawkinson. He's going to get more looks from Jared Goff than he did Stafford. Right now, he's the best pass catcher in the offense and will get force-fed the ball. The way fantasy is evolving, we need to land a tight end in order to be a contender. I think that's just kind of how the game's going right now. If you're not a fan of grabbing those early round tight ends like Kels, Waller, and then my good old bust from the 49ers. But if you're not a fan of grabbing those guys, then maybe look to snag Hawk in the 5th round. Other than that, not much more to say. The offense kind of is not great, and I do not like to pick people on offenses that, I would just want to say this, suck. So honestly, I'm probably not going to be drafting TJ Hawkins this year. But
it's kind of similar to the Jets last year, right? Their offense was just god awful, and I mean, well, their shining light last year had to have been Jamison Crowder. Me and Mason had him in our league, and I mean, you couldn't even start him every week. Like he would have really bad weeks. Yeah. I mean, this Detroit offense might be that same trap. However, they do have good skill at the running back position, and I guess Hawk, but I don't see it.
To speak on that running back skill, my guarantee is going to be Jamal Williams. I mean, we've seen him play second fiddle to Aaron Jones in the past up in Green Bay, and he's shown the ability to be able to produce even when he doesn't have the amount of carries that the starting running back gets. And I mean, he's shown promise in the offense as the starting running back the past few practices, because like Mason talked about, DeAndre Swift is still coming back from injury at the moment. I mean, he's produced in the past 2 years on limited touches, 296 touches for 1,454 all-purpose yards. The touchdowns are down a little bit with only 3, but again, you're getting limited touches out of him. You're not drafting him to be a number 1 running back. I mean, it's potential if DeAndre Swift stays hurt, if he gets hurt, but not drafting him to be your running back 1 or 2. He's really just a flex position. But if you have the need, I think he's going to fill in admirably. I think he'll get you those 7 to 8 points that you look for out of a flex position if you don't have anybody else that week to start. Obviously, we've already kind of talked about how these guys feel about Jamal Williams. Stone thinks it's a pretty decent running back group. And I would just have to agree to that.
Yeah, and also fun fact, one of our content creators behind the scenes, Andrew Mitchell, he has Jamal Williams as a top 20 fantasy RB this year. Is that a bold statement, would you guys say?
I think it's slightly bold, but again, I think it's all going to come down to the best ability, which is availability of DeAndre Swift. And if he can stay healthy, then I don't foresee Jamal getting into the top 20, but if he gets a bulk of the carries and he has an uptick in production from what he had or potential, what he had in Green Bay, then I think it's possible.
Yeah, if DeAndre Swift is hurt all year, I could definitely see Jamal Williams breaking into that barrier and being that big running back steal of the season. So that's going to wrap up about every single team that we've talked about today. Before we close things up, we're going to talk about who we have winning the divisions, and I kind of want to start with Mason's pick.
All right.
Here, I'll give you help. It's the Green Bay Packers, just so you know.
Sorry. I'm about to pee my pants, actually, and I cannot concentrate for anything right now. So my pick is the Packers this year. Like I've said before, I'm huge on Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams' final dance. I think the only reason Aaron Rodgers came back is because he believes he has the ability to win a Super Bowl with the Packers. So I think that just means that they're going to win the division.
Yep, and a big-time Bears fan. I think we have a chance at the division. However, if I'm going to realistically speak, how do I pick against the Packers, who are probably going to go out and win 12, 13 games again this year? Whereas I could see the Bears possibly getting up to 10, 11, maybe even better because of, Justin Fields, the whole fandom's back. But Aaron Rodgers, Adams, Aaron Jones, Jair Alexander, Zadarius Smith, the list goes on of top-tier players they have on that team. I think it's just a very well-built team, and I think they're going to win the division.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be that homer. Chicago Bears. I'm taking them. I feel like when we drafted Justin Fields, which not a lot of people thought was gonna happen. Picking him at 11, trading up for him, it just brought back the same feeling and allure that trading for Khalil Mack did in 2018. When nobody thought he was going to come to Chicago, when everybody thought he was going to go to Green Bay or going to go to a contender, Ryan Pace comes out of nowhere with one of the biggest blockbuster trades that I can remember since I've been watching football. And he brings in Defensive Player of the Year caliber Khalil Mack, play for the Chicago Bears. Like, it just seems like a match made in heaven, right? And he brought that defense back. He brought that crazed fandom back that everybody bought in. And it's not that we didn't have a good roster or we didn't have the talent. It was just we didn't have that same feeling. We didn't have everybody buying in. It was people on the fence of for him coming in was all Trubisky. We don't like him. We do like him. The fan base was torn. Now bringing in Justin Fields, nobody's torn about it. You ask any Bears fan, I don't care if they're a Big Ten fan and they hate Wisconsin or they hate Ohio State, whoever. Like, bringing in Justin Fields to be your starting quarterback, I think he was the biggest steal of the entire draft. Dropping outside the top 10, all the teams that passed on him, the Jets passing on him, take Zach Wilson. I think they'll regret it. I think that Trey Lance, whether he's great, doesn't matter to me. I think he'll be looked at as somebody who doesn't live up to what Justin Fields can produce and be for a starting franchise. And the same goes for Giants, who actually traded us the pick 11. I think that with their kind of uncertainty about Danny Dimes and trying to build the offense around him, I just think everything that Justin Fields brings, his leadership, star potential, the franchise guy, regardless of him sitting a couple games to start the season, I think he's just going to return the revitalization and the rejuvenation to the Chicago Bears that we've been lacking. We've seen that miracle run in 2018 when we traded for Khalil Mack. Had the double doink happen. Unfortunately, we're going to put that on a kicker, but that team could have made a Super Bowl run. And now that we have that defense set in stone, per se, our offense is just going to continue to grow, have more continuity and chemistry. Like I said, I'm a homer. I'm never going to pick against my Bears. I would if they were complete trash. I think this team is just poised to make a run. I think they're going to return to the top of the NFC North.
I'm a big Bears fan, so obviously I think we can make a run for it, but I just think the Packers are the better team. Mason, do you think the Bears could make a run at it?
No.
That's a truly honest answer. Most people would probably have the Vikings ranked ahead of the Bears, honestly, and personally I could see that being the case. I mean, the Vikings are not a bad team.
We don't know what's going to happen I think it comes down to the Bears' offense. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be, and we don't know what we're going to see out of the quarterback this year. They're going to have to be able to compete with Aaron Rodgers. I don't know.
It's just
No
too many
chance.
questions. Yeah, it's just too many question marks, and even as a Bears fan, I can acknowledge that. But that's going to be all the time we have today for the podcast. Wrapping up the NFC North, Mason has the Packers, I have the Packers, and Paul has the Chicago Bears, the homer. Before we sign out here, I want to say that our schedule has been set. We are planning on posting these podcasts at 5 o'clock Central Standard Time every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Before we head out of here, I want to shout out our social medias one last time. Facebook is the Fantasy Few. Instagram is the Fantasy Few with no caps. And Twitter is the Fantasy Few, capitals at the beginning of each letter. Mason, you got any closing arguments to say?
Fantasy Few out, baby.
Paul, how about yourself?
Tear down Chicago. Let's go.
All right, thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Fantasy Few.